Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the Red Shadow once more, and in this video I want to basically kind of cover the games I have played this year. Just give my thoughts on each, going back to the beginning of the year up until what I've beat as recently as yesterday. I may have covered some of these games in one of my previous videos. I think I did a vlog or something that was just me giving some gaming thoughts, and I think in that one I talked about a couple of these games, but I'm just going to do this video so that it kind of purges the I get these ideas for a video. Oh, let's talk about this. Wait, did I talk about that? And I think I've said it on here before, I don't watch any of my videos. After they go up onto the channel, they're gone. I purge everything that's in my head that brought me to sitting down and making those videos, and I don't think about it anymore. So like I said, if I've already talked about some of this, I apologize for anybody who's watching any of this, if I'm, doubling up on content. So anyway, I have completed 8, 10, 12, at this point 14 games this year. And I'm probably going to hammer out a whole bunch of additional ones in August, because I have several games queued up. I have a little stack of PS4 games that are my intended to play soon games, as well as some stuff on my computer on Steam that I also want to play. A lot of this inspired by my top 30 favorite games list. Some of them are replays of games from that list that I haven't played in a few years or longer. That's another reason I think why I want to do this now, and then try to resume a monthly roundup video at the end of every month. So at the end of August I'll talk about whatever I've been playing since this video. So anyway, some of these can go by real quick. I've got my list here on my phone. So the first game that I completed this year, because sometimes I'll start a game and I'm just not feeling it and I pass on by and I go to something else. The first thing that I beat this year was Red Dead Redemption 2. Excuse me. That was a replay, but it was my first replay of the entire game since I played it originally in 2018. And the game is phenomenal. Some people give that game shit for being slow and deliberate in some ways, like not having a real true fast travel system that doesn't limit you to certain areas or require you to cross half of the map to get to the place you can fast travel from, and just how long it takes for your character to loot a body and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Those things really don't make any difference as far as I'm concerned. My opinion is that's a crazy thing to complain about. But otherwise, in every other category for me, storyline, just the shooting and the gameplay, the missions, the acting and voice acting, and just all of the things you can do in that game, and some of the kind of really cool secrets / nods to the original game are awesome. It is a prequel to the original Red Dead Redemption, which is also a great game, but 2 surpassed it in my opinion by leaps and bounds. So that was the first game that I beat this year. I don't feel like I have a whole lot much to say about that in this video. The second game that I played, that I beat in February, was Grand Theft Auto 5. Also another replay. I've replayed and beat that game a handful of times now. I think 4 or 5 times altogether. It's funny, I didn't mention to start off in this video, but my intention coming into this year, I don't do New Year's resolutions for normal life stuff, but I like to do gaming resolutions. And I couldn't do YouTube at the time, but I had a gaming resolution at the beginning of this year of 2 particular things. One, play more new games that I've never played before, and excuse me, take my time. Don't try to rush through a game for any reason. Take my time, enjoy the games, see what they have to offer. If I'm playing a game and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of ready for this to be done, then I'm not going to, dive into 20 hours of side quests. But my intention was to just kind of like take my time with stuff and play newer things. So I started off the year playing not one, not two, but 3 straight games I'd already played before. But it's just, I can't really make myself conform to any sort of specific plan. It really just comes down to, do I want to play this game? Do I want to play that game? I think I'll play that game instead. And so the year started with me replaying a couple of my favorite games. I don't know exactly what happened in March, because I don't have a game completion for March. The next game that I completed on my list was April 2nd. I finished Life is Strange. Now, I played Life is Strange, surely, for some part of March. But Life is Strange is not a game that takes a month to play unless you were literally playing like half an hour every day. That was, like I said, that was a replay. Something got in my brain to play the original Life is Strange so that I could play for the first time Before the Storm. And as you know, at this point, if you watch most of, if not all of my stuff, you've seen the video that covers the first couple videos that covers my top 30 games. You know that Life is Storm / Before the Storm is on my top 30 list. That's why I played it, was because I wanted to, like I said, relive how much I loved the first game, and then finally get a chance to play the prequel, which I probably loved more. So I beat Before the Storm on April 12th. So Life is Strange on the 2nd, 10 days later on the 12th, Before the Storm. At that point, I had gotten internet turned back on, and so I'd had a plan since late last year that as soon as I had internet back on and I could download any updates and patches for one of what I think was one of the cooler games from last year, but was a broken mess at release, and that's Cyberpunk 2077. I played that and beat it on May 6th and loved the game, which to me is, the game is what everybody always talks about, the gameplay, the story, graphics to an extent. The gameplay was fine. It was... I posted a mini review, not a review, but, here's my thoughts about Cyberpunk after I beat it. And in one of the places where I talked about it, I said that CD Projekt Red released the best Bethesda game of 2020 with Cyberpunk. Because that's basically what it is. It's a first-person, Western-style RPG, just like Fallout, just like Elder Scrolls, only this is in a Cyberpunk universe. It plays and controls very much like that, with with the hacking and all that kind of stuff added into it. So as far as the gameplay was concerned, it was fine. Shooting, driving, all that kind of stuff. Driving had some issues, but it's just because it didn't. Yeah, the driving doesn't match up to Grand Theft Auto 5. But it was still playable for sure. Graphics, well, if you've seen anything about Cyberpunk's advertising up to and since then, if you're playing that game on a high-end, powerful PC, or like if you're playing it on the new gen consoles, the game doesn't look too bad. It's pretty nice. I especially love the just utter saturation of all those neon lights and colors and stuff in the game. On PS4, At launch, the game was pretty ugly. After the updates and patches that were as of, basically like April or May of this year, it looked better, but it's still not great. I'm still super disappointed that CD Projekt Red announced a game like 8-9 years ago and then didn't really start production on it until a couple of years ago. And then the higher-ups and the executives at CD Projekt Red said, gotta have it out by this particular holiday, do everything that you can, and all the kind of shenanigans that they pulled. I fully hold the executives, the top dogs, in the wrong for that. The developers do not deserve the shit that they were given because they worked on that game and worked their ass off for it, and then they saw it get thrown out there while it was still raw. That was a game that needed a lot more time in the oven. But it was better by the time these patches and stuff came through this year, and so it didn't look as ugly, but it's still, like I said, disappointed that they couldn't. They talk about putting a game out on last gen's consoles and had all those years to do it, and still put it out on the last gen of consoles, PS4 and Xbox One, and fumbled it so badly. Like, I remember I tweeted them, I think it's still on Twitter, I tweeted them a couple years back and said, this game is still coming to PS4 and Xbox One, right? And I got a response back, yes, it absolutely is coming to those consoles. And I was super happy because, I still don't know if I'm going to have a PS5. But then when we started to see what was really going on with the game, by the time I got to play it day one for a little while and then locked out because of my PS4 connecting to my hotspot data on my phone, but not having enough to download the patches, and the console literally saying, you can't play it now until you do this, I knew that it was rough. And like I said, it's better, but there is the saying about polishing a turd. It's just a nicer looking piece of shit. That's pretty harsh, and I'm really talking more about like the graphics and the glitches, because like I said, the gameplay is fine and the story was great. It doesn't rank on my favorite games of all time, and I'd hope that it would, as much as I love The Witcher 3 from CD Projekt Red. Cyberpunk could have been there. It wasn't, but it was still, like, my favorite games last year all got my own personal rating of 9 out of 10. Cyberpunk was an 8 out of 10. So it's still pretty good. If you can wade through all the remaining bullshit, or if you can play it on the newer consoles, or if you wait for the version that's eventually supposed to come out for PS5 and Series X, it's really worth playing. Okay, so there's some thoughts about Cyberpunk 2077. The next game that I beat, Cyberpunk, on May 6th, a whole 5 days later on the 11th, I beat Resident Evil Village. Still, at this point, of all the games that came out this year, like brand new releases this year, not remakes or remasters, not something like Cyberpunk that came out just last year. Of all the games that I've played that were actually released this year, Resident Evil Village is still my game of the year so far. And it's such a weird Resident Evil game. Like, even more so than 7. 7 was strange because it didn't look like the last 4 or 5 Resident Evils, but it went back to the scares and some of the weird Japanese, zombie biohazard stuff. 8 goes well off the rails. And since it's still a pretty fresh game, I'm not really going to spoil it. Just, it's good. Play it. Give 9 out of 10, I'd say, to it. Has definitely a part in the game that's the scariest of anything in any Resident Evil game that I remember. Mind you, I have not played Resident Evil 2 Remake, but of the original 1, 2, 3, Code Veronica, 4, which I've played a little bit of. Code Veronica I've only played a little bit of. And then, like, you know, 5 and 6 and what they're all about. But even with 7, going back to the scares, 8 has a part that's scarier than all of it. It's just good stuff. I was gonna wait and not buy that game on release, and I made a last-second decision and got it when I did, and I'm glad that I did. So that was beaten on May 11th. The next thing that entered into my world this year for gaming was the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Now, allow me to talk about my time with the Mass Effect series in the past. So, years and years and years ago, whenever it came out, basically, on the Xbox 360, they released the Mass Effect Trilogy box set. Should have grabbed it for this, but whatever. Compiled all 3 games at that time into one big box set. I'd never owned any of the games separately. I didn't play any of them when they came out. I knew that they were supposed to be really good, and everybody was always talking about them. So when that Trilogy box set came out, I was like, I have to buy it. I need to know what the hype's all about. I know that BioWare was a great developer. I'd played some Knights of the Old Republic. I own a handful of their earlier games, but I really just played a little bit of KOTOR, and that was it. But I liked it. Everybody had said that Mass Effect, they'd really evolved, and they were at the top of their game. So I got that trilogy. I busted out the first game. I got far enough into the game where I think it was the first time that you're on the ship and you can go to the galaxy map and travel to wherever you want to travel to. And so I picked a planet and I went to it, and you're in the Mako or the Mako, and you're driving around and I think it's a distress call, and you roll up on this, looks like a crashed ship, and there's some bodies there, and then this big old thing comes up out of the ground. It's a Thresher Maw. And I was like, holy crap, what am I going to do about this? And I drive that stupid Mako around, bouncing and flopping all over, trying to shoot at this thing, and it's just laying into me, and I die. And I respawn, like, back to the where you land on the planet initially, and go back to it. And I tried it 4 or 5 times in a row. Now, maybe that doesn't show a lot of patience, whereas somebody else would just keep going and keep going. But after 4 or 5 times of dying to that thing, I shut the game off, and I put it back in the box, and it went back up on the shelf, and I didn't touch it for 4 or 5 years. And in 2018, when Red Dead Redemption 2 was about to come out, I wanted to replay Red Dead, and I own it for the 360. And so I turned my 360 on, pop Red Dead in, I play through it. I played the Undead Nightmare for the first time. Cool, different, but cool. And then I thought, shoot, I still had a couple of weeks before Red Dead 2 was coming out. I didn't estimate my time correctly, and I was like, well, what am I gonna do? You know, I could have went back to my PS4 and played some more games there, but I was like, nah, I turned the 360 back on, let's give it some more love. And I decided to unearth Mass Effect again. And I'm missing a step here, whoops, because that was in 2018. In 2017, I believe, is when Mass Effect Andromeda came out. I had no pardon me, I had no, frame of reference really on Mass Effect, other than that playing it that one time and getting frustrated and not playing it anymore. But a friend of mine at work at that time, when I was at Walmart my first time around, was a big Mass Effect fan, and he was high for Andromeda. Andromeda's coming out, the first Mass Effect on that generation of consoles, and man, he just kept talking about it and talking it up, and I was like, all right, you've sold me. I'll buy Andromeda when it comes out, and just like, screw it, I'll just play it. Instead of going back and trying to replay the original games, I'll just play Andromeda. And I really liked Andromeda. Sue me, but I really, really enjoyed Andromeda a whole lot. I think by the time I got it, I don't think I got it on release, but within a week or two of it coming out, and I'd already heard the stories and seen the footage of the goofy animations on the faces, and it looks bad, and oh, everybody's taking a shit on Mass Effect Andromeda. BioWare has dropped the ball. Well, by the time I got the game, whatever patches they needed to fix that were in there. Definitely one of the first instances of that kind of stuff in my, in my spectrum of like, oh, I'm watching IGN and other YouTube videos that are talking about stuff like this. Oh my gosh, games are getting released unfinished and they have to patch them and yada, yada, yada. Well, by the time I got Andromeda and downloaded all the patches, the wonky facial animations and movement of the characters and all that stuff were fixed and addressed, and I just got to experience a Mass Effect Andromeda, or a Mass Effect game in Andromeda all the way through from start to finish. I loved it. I thought it was a great game. Probably a 9 out of 10 game there for me. I don't weigh my 9 out of 10s the same as other 9 out of 10s. I wouldn't consider Mass Effect Andromeda to be at the same level as Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy VII Remake. But at the time, playing that game, when it was out, it was a 9 out of 10 experience for me. So anyway, I start, sharing in Facebook groups and forums and websites and stuff that I go to and talk about gaming stuff, about how much I loved Andromeda. And they're like, well, what about the other games? I'm like, I haven't really played them. And everybody's like, oh, you got to play them. If you like Andromeda, most people don't, you're going to love the other games. So that brings us to 2018. After playing Red Dead, awaiting the release of Red Dead 2, I'm like, 360 is it's relevant to me at that moment. They're all relevant, but you know what I mean. Like, since the PS4 has been along, I play most of my games on the PS4. I'm like, let's continue to give the 360 some love. That's when I went back to Mass Effect. And that was when I was not looking forward to going back to that planet, but I didn't know which planet it was. And I went to other planets and played more of the game, and it got its claws into me. I really was enjoying the first Mass Effect. And by the time I got back to that Thresher Maw planet, I had no problems with it. It happens to me so many times. Probably a ton of you watching this too have had that experience where you play a game, no matter what the game is. It doesn't have to be something that's tough. Most people probably don't think that Thresher Maw battle is tough, but it handed me my ass multiple times. But when I went back to it, no problem. First or second time, I killed it. And it just opened the door for me to continue on and play that game all the way through. Really loved it. Still loved Andromeda more. Obviously, moved on to number 2. Got to play this one, especially because a lot of people had been talking 2 up as the best of the series. So I played 2, and I liked it. But this is probably going to weird a lot of people out, but I didn't like 2 as much as 1, so therefore I didn't like 2 as much as Andromeda. At this point, Andromeda is my number 1, Mass Effect 1 is my number 2, and Mass Effect 2 is my 3rd on my list. But I did beat it, and I really did enjoy it. I love any game, any movie, any TV show that's sort of like people are together in intense situations. They go on an adventure, they barely make it back, then they disperse, and then they come back for some reason and kind of like reconnect. In a game form, that's really, really awesome. I did enjoy that. I think my problem with it, though, was just that I didn't really get to know the new characters as well as I would have liked to. I kind of screwed up on some of the romantic options. And overall, I felt the discovery of this world did more for me in the first game than coming back to it in the second game. And so, like I said, it's just barely below the first Mass Effect game, but it's still at the bottom of my list. So then I move on to number 3, because Red Dead 2 is still not out by that point. I move on to number 3, and that game in the beginning is it jolted me. It was like, it's like it grabbed me and it shook me, and it was like I was not expecting this. The graphical style of it, the continued more leanings towards an action game than a straight up RPG, and I didn't get far enough into it to really understand what that game was about. I had gotten to the point where I'd started to recruit planets, races, characters, armies, whatever, towards the ultimate battle, but I didn't get to finish it. And I think at the time I was a little bit happy about that, because I'd also heard shit tons of stories about 3 and about how people really didn't like the ending, and I wasn't sure that I was all that excited about getting to the ending and seeing what I thought about it. And then, like I said, finally Red Dead 2 was out, and I played that, and I just sort of I moved away from the Mass Effect games until Legendary Edition came out. So Legendary Edition gave me the opportunity to jump back in, and so in the month of May, I beat the first Mass Effect on May 29th. That was the one that had the most like remake / remaster aspects to it. It was a really nice looking game. Still pretty much, in my opinion, played the same. I know some control options were changed, and like you weren't locked to certain kinds of weapons as whatever your specialty or class was. None of that really matters to me. I always just get guns and shoot shit. I don't go for any kind of special classes or techniques or any of that kind of stuff. My shepherd was a male shepherd, and he was just a shooter and shot everything, and then I rely on my people around me to do all the other stuff. So I beat that one, like I said, on the 29th. Wanted to move into Mass Effect 2, but one of my most anticipated games of the front half of this year was out by that point, and that was Biomutant. So I don't know if I've talked about this in one of those prior videos, but I played Biomutant, beat it on June 16th, and that game was good, but not as good as I would have liked it to have been. It was too long. It was too drawn out. It's one of the first times that I've had one of those open world games with all that shit dotted all over the map, and I'd go do stuff on the map, and I'd forget where I was supposed to go for the story, because it's not entirely... You can tell on the map what is your storyline missions, but the game doesn't really... I don't know. The interactions between your character and NPCs, everybody complains, of course, about the narrator, and yeah, the narrator was kind of a chore. I would have liked it if the narrator just narrated and the NPCs talked for themselves. The narrator could have talked up a storm in between missions, or, prepping a mission or explaining a mission, but to have the narrator be like, you walk up to a shop owner and they go, "Ooh-da-doo-ba-la-ba-da-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo," and they're speaking with a voice actor doing the voice acting, and then the narrator's like, "They say you should grab this item because it's really good." And then the narrator's like, "Maybe it's about time we move on to the next thing we need to do," and just... It was just kind of unnecessary. It felt like maybe an answer to either a lower budget or maybe a COVID-related thing, not being able to get all of those people together. Maybe some of that gibberish language was recorded, but they didn't have a chance to have everybody finish all the lines, and so they just went that way. Or, like I said, maybe it was just a budgetary thing. It's hard to say, but it didn't bother me as much as, like I said, in all of these games that I've talked about here, like Cyberpunk and Resident Evil and the Mass Effect games, it just feels like you know what you're supposed to be doing, and you know what's secondary missions. And in Biomutant, I would start doing the secondary missions and the side quests, and then I just have absolutely no idea what I was really supposed to be doing, despite the fact there would be markers on the map that were story missions, main missions. It's hard to explain it. It's a game that I hope the team behind it Experiment 101 or something like that. I hope that they learn from this, and I hope that their publisher or another publisher will give them another chance to learn from what they did, because I think it was still a really good game, and I think that they could build off of it and do something even better next time. But anyway, Biomutant, that would, from me, that would probably get like a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. So after Biomutant, I was able to go back to Mass Effect. So I played Mass Effect 2 for the second ever time. Still feel the same way about it. Still a great game. I completed that on the 28th. I hammered some of these out because we're actually rolling into around the time that I stopped being employed. And this will give you a good example of that. I beat Mass Effect 2 on June 28th. I beat Mass Effect 3 on July 2nd. That's basically like 5 days. But for like 5 days, I just played that game, and knocked it out. So, that got me to having finally finished Mass Effect 3. So what did I think about it? Well, there's a new favorite Mass Effect game on the top of my list. It's Mass Effect 3. To me, that's the best game out of the series. I don't really get what people were upset about in the ending. What I've heard is that it's really weird and kind of like, I don't know, like the ending to 2001: A Space Odyssey. That's just sort of weird and out there. Some people have said that the limited number of endings, that there's basically 3 ending paths you can choose that can deviate a little bit depending on choices made, but everybody says as much choice that you had during the 3 games, that it distilled the ending down to just a couple of choices was a bad choice on the part of the game makers. I don't care. I picked the choice that seemed to make the most sense to me, and that's what I went with. Also, some people were just upset about the story ending, the way that the story ended, and I think that that's just people. Well, I don't want to spoil it, so I guess I won't say anything, but let's just say that I thought something way more out there was going to happen, and that was what everybody was pissed off about. To find out that people were pissed off about shit that, in my opinion, is inconsequential. And let's think about this for a second, guys. It's just a fucking game. It's just a story in a video game. The characters aren't real. You weren't really there doing it. I love to get an immense sense of escape in video games. I love that. Believe me, I do. But it's not the end of the world if things don't work out the way that you want. Break that connection from video games and TV and movies, characters from books and all this kind of stuff. You gotta break that connection. It'll be okay. They're just a video game. I have immense respect for the people who write stories and games and movies and TV shows, and sometimes they fall flat. It's sure, but it's no reason to just get so fucking upset. Like, I don't even know what DLC BioWare made for Mass Effect 3 to try to appease people over it, but like, that was to throw a big fit, and I think it even included shit like death threats over it. Humanity needs to be better than that, man. You think you're entitled to something because you give somebody your money. It's hard-earned money that could go to something else, but you choose to buy something. You choose to watch something, and then you choose to get really upset when it's not the way you think it should be. I'm not going to get into it. Like I said, Mass Effect 3 is the best of the fucking whole 4-game series, in my opinion, with Andromeda a close second, and then 1, and then 2. That's my thoughts on it. So anyway, the next game I beat was Vampire. I think it's pronounced Vampire, or maybe it's Vampire, but it's the Don't Nod Vampire game from a couple years back. I beat that on July 13th. I really liked that game. I loved seeing the Don't Nod / Telltale game style dialogue choices. People will remember that kind of stuff to a grander scale and in a more 3D adventure action style game. Not like walk through a small little area, have a bunch of narrative, but you actually got to move around. You had a combat system that I liked quite a bit. You talk to a lot of people. You can screw stuff up and have like a whole territory or area in that game just completely melt down and everybody becomes zombie creatures. It happened to me, that's why I'm saying that. Hoping that if I like replay it sometime in the future that I'll do a little bit better job. But overall I still got a good ending. I think it has, I don't know, maybe that game doesn't really have more than one ending, but anyway, I was happy with that game, and I would love to see them do a sequel because I feel like the story would allow for it. Alright, the next thing I beat was a game that I beat in basically 2 days, and that's a game called Claire. It's the Claire Extended Cut on PS4. Completed that on July 14th after playing some the 13th after I beat Vampire, and then playing the next day. That's a kind of side-scrolling pixelated horror game. There's a handful of games like that on the PS4. I own a few. This game was really, really good from a spooky atmosphere and story, dialogue, writing aspect. But the one thing that sucked was, like I said, it's a side-scrolling game. You're literally just walking your character. You come out of a door, you're in a hallway, there's things, you run, you go into this other thing. Then there's a new screen, and you're moving left to right or right to left, interacting with things, finding things, talking to things. But they give you a 3D style map, sort of like Silent Hill, like the maps in Silent Hill would look. And if you know what those maps look like in Silent Hill, it's like you're looking at a sheet of paper that shows a building with all these different rooms. Like you're looking down and seeing it in a full, in a 2D dimension, but not from the side. When you exit out of the map, you're now looking at the side. So then you have to look on the map again to see what these 2 or 3 doors in this hallway, where they're actually going on the map, and it doesn't always work the way you think that it should. Made that game incredibly difficult to navigate, and I didn't want to spend 25 hours wandering around in a game that should only take 6 or 7. And so I used a guide and just skidooed all the way through that game after a little bit of frustration and wandering around not knowing where I was going. I just referred to a guide and got me through the game. So it's a bit of a knock against a game like that. That's probably about a 7 out of 10 for me. It might have been a 7.5 to even an 8 had it not had that problem. So anyway, that was on the 14th, basically like 2 weeks ago. The next game that I jumped into was Far Cry 5. I have been replaying all of the main Far Cry games since 3. Started last summer. It was in anticipation of the release of Far Cry 6, because that's probably my most, or one of my most anticipated games for this year. So I wanted to play 3, and then I wanted to play 4, and I wanted to play 5, and then I wanted to play New Dawn. Skipping Primal because I just don't care for the spear and bow shit from that. I like the guns. Give me the guns, give me the sniper rifles, and explosives and stuff like that. So I played 3, like I said, last summer. And then I played 4 closer to the latter part of last year. And then this year has flown by for me. I was like, crap, I need to play 5 because we're coming up on 6 in just a couple months. And it's the last of the bigger ones. New Dawn is a smaller, more contained game. So that I'm going to play probably, I'm aiming for sometime in August and September at the latest, because I think 6 is coming out in October. Anyway, I love it. Far Cry 5. 3 is probably the best story, best characters, best villains kind of thing. Maybe not the characters as much, because some of those college-age kids in that game are some real douchebags. But Voss as one of the main villains in that are pretty awesome. But it's just fun. It was the first Far Cry game, in my opinion, that really had the Far Cry formula of today. It was the first one to do that. and super fun with the island. Far Cry 4 is really good. I like the change in the scenery. You had a little bit more of a bland main character, and Pagan Min as a antagonist is really cool, but you rarely ever see him. You hear him, but you rarely ever see him in action. 5 is weird. A lot of people don't seem to like it because it's just takes place in the U.S. It takes on like a religious cult type thing. A lot of people don't like the ending because they feel like it's kind of a bad ending. What I like about it is it takes place in Montana. I used to live in Montana. Montana, I still consider that home, and at this point in my life, I've spent almost half of my life in this one city where I'm at in Missouri. And I would give anything to go back to Montana, but right now I just can't. Circumstances don't allow. When Far Cry 5 was like, we're going to be in Montana, I was so on board, and that game nails the aesthetic and the topography, the geography of Montana very well. And then it takes some stereotypes of like the crazy religious people in the woods and amplifies it a millionfold. But it's not way off from reality. But yeah, playing that game brings back some memories, and I just, like I said, I really, really enjoy it. Probably the weakest villains of all of them since 3. But yeah, it's just Far Cry games don't have to give me a whole lot of story. Just unleash me in some sort of world and just let me, you know, conquer outposts, climb towers, you know, hunt. I was going to say fish, but I don't like the fishing thing, but I don't mind hunting for the animals to get resources to upgrade certain things. They took a lot of that stuff away by 5, and I would love to see some of that come back, but, you know, it is what it is. So Far Cry 5, I beat that on the 25th. That was just a couple of days ago, and I've managed to beat one more game since then, a little indie adventure platformer game called Forgotten Anne. And this was a game that got a physical release from Limited Run Games. Thank goodness for that. A few years ago, I saw advertisements for this game on Facebook. I'm like 99% sure I just saw an advertised thing from either the developers or like a Kickstarter thing saying we're making this game. It's hand-drawn, animated, like a cartoon. And it looked like it was going to be a side-scrolling, you know, platforming style game, and it's not like jumpy all over the place kind of platform game, whatever that means. It's platforming, it's climbing, it's jumping, it's manipulating objects, it's solving puzzles, it's talking to NPCs, it's having some dialogue choices that can direct your game towards one ending or another. But I was just really excited because of how what the graphical style is. Like I mentioned, it looks like a cartoon. I've seen some reviews and stuff call it Studio Ghibli-like. I don't think it's quite on par with Studio Ghibli. Studio Ghibli stuff is fantastic. This looks like maybe somebody was inspired by it but weren't necessarily trying to be it. But it's a really beautiful game. I think that either the story of this game should be adapted into a movie or a series, or some sort of a spin-off or a sequel or adjacent story would be really cool with this cartoon style. I'd be all for something like that. Alright, and then, like I said, I'm currently playing Observer System Redux. That's up on the TV right now. I'm going to grab something real quick to show before I wrap this video up. This isn't necessarily going to reflect later on this year, I'm sure, but this is my current PS4 on deck. I'm trying to do something now. So many of my games just get lost in the backlog, and then I'll just forget about something that I really wanted to play, and then I'll be bummed that I didn't. So I've grabbed a handful of games here, in addition to Observer. That is stuff I'm probably going to try to play soon. So I'm going to go through these real quick. It's Simulacra. I showed this in my pickups video. That'll go up before this. Arcade Spirits. Project Warlock, the aforementioned Observer, and then here's a couple of things here that I kind of grabbed off the shelf that I've had for a while. We've got Away, Journey to the Unexpected, first-person kind of RPG-ish style game that I've been wanting to check out for a while. I did not realize that this game had roguelike or roguelite aspects to it, which means like every time I die, I go back and start at my house, and I keep my experience points and some progress, but other things kind of start over again. I'm kind of iffy on those games, but I'm going to continue to stick with it. And then I'm going to throw Lego City Undercover in here at some point to check it out. Basically Lego's GTA game. I've been wanting to play it for a long time. Wish I would have bought it when it first came out, because it had a Lego included and it had the big box. And then a game that does have a big box, but this is just the disc copy itself, Axiom Verge, a Metroidvania style game I've been wanting to play for a long time. That one's going to be something I'm going to play real soon. And if I had the computer up where I could show it, and if my battery wasn't getting ready to run out again, I would show a few of the Steam games that I have queued up, but I'll talk about those if I do jump in there. I'm kind of bound and determined before this year is over to play something that's not on PS4. And so for the most part for me right now, that would be like 360 or PS2 or my Super Nintendo Classic or the PC. So anyway, enough rambling from me. That's just the games I've played so far this year and a little bit of a look at my future plays. And this video will spin off into the monthly roundup, where I will talk about the games I've played during the month that they come at the end of. So the next time I do something like this will be at the end of August, talking about what games I did play and finish since this video, and if I watch any movies or TV shows, which I am currently watching The X-Files. I've actually been rewatching The X-Files since last October. I'm in season 8. I slowed down and fell off of it for a while. But anyway, hopefully by the end of next month, maybe I'll be done with my watch of the whole entire series of that. And then we'll talk more about that then. So anyway, thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.